Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We are here today for episode 3 of Get Stacked Live. And today we are joined with a very special guest, James Veale, who I will introduce you all to very, very shortly. If you're new here today, if you have any questions, drop a message in the comments. We would love to hear from you and go through our questions at the end. If you've already been on our last couple of sessions, then we hope that you have found them really useful. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Holly Langley. I'm the founder of Restack, and we exclusively work with Bullhorn customers to help them maximize automation, data, AI, and everything else within the Bullhorn marketplace and the Bullhorn platform. I'm now going to introduce you to James, who will tell you all a bit about who he is and what his day-to-day looks like, because James has got a very interesting job title. Over to you, James.
Hey Holly, thanks for having me. So everyone, I'm James Veale. I am the Systems Innovation Manager over at Meet Life Sciences. So my role mainly involves kind of looking after our commercial sales systems. So the real focus for my role is making sure that our tech stack is optimized so that we can enable as much sales as possible. And as I've been a Bullhorn customer for about 8 or 9 years now, I've seen the system used in a lot of different ways. I'm very familiar with all the products they use. So we kind of design our systems to utilize them as well as we can do.
Interesting. And so Systems Innovation Manager, that is a great title. Did you come up with that, or was that a job that that came to you and you thought that's right on my street?
Yeah, so it was kind of like a working title when I first spoke to Glenn, my manager, about it. Sort of this time last year, there or thereabouts. And yeah, it really kind of piqued my interest. A lot of what I've been doing over the last sort of 8 years or so has been around pushing systems to to the max, see how much we can get around them, see where we can break things, and also kind of keeping an eye on new tech that's out there. So, I like to try and talk about my role saying that I'm focusing on new systems, new tech, and new processes, really kind of looking for any opportunity to change things, to either streamline or simplify things for the sales team, use a new bit of tech that we haven't had access to before, or just kind of make things make a little bit more sense.
Interesting. Well, that sounds great. And I know you very well, so I know that suits you down to the ground.
Thank you.
So something that we speak about a lot, and we were just talking about whilst we were in the waiting room, and whenever we meet, we end up talking about this, is about the automations that we see within customers and how we see people using this. And one of the things that we come back to time and time again is that you can't set and forget your automations, because if you do that, they're going to be out of date, they're not going to get updated, and this stuff isn't going to be working for you in that way you need it to be. So the first question that I've got for you really is, what are the key signs that an automation workflow or an automation needs to be optimized or updated?
Yeah, so I think increasingly we're seeing more and more people stepping into roles where they're using Bullhorn automation and they're not the first person within the business to do it. Maybe it was introduced by someone 6 months ago, a year ago, longer than that. Maybe they're stepping into a new role that's been created where they're now helping build out new automations. And I'd say a very clear sign is if you didn't make it and you don't have clear notes on how it should work, that is a really clear sign that you need to review it and it possibly needs to be optimized. I think, they say with like with maps that it's only accurate up until the day that it was created, and I think a similar thing can be true with a lot of automations. We make lots of changes into workflow settings, note actions, and even sort of the staff within the business as well. And I've experienced lots of automations being built around a certain person being the owner of a record, or a certain person needing to be notified in order to trigger something else. So, if you've had people leave the business, you've had people join the business, that's often an indication that you need to review and just make sure that everything is updated. I'd say you need to kind of record this outside of Bullhorn automation as well. So, get your way of being able to record the status of an automation and when you next need to take some action.
100%. Now, for those of you who know me, I normally come onto webinars and say, everyone get rid of spreadsheets. I hate spreadsheets. It's that they're the death of the recruitment industry because we use them, not Bullhorn. However, there are times like this that the spreadsheet is crucial. So we've got a really good template that we use that covers off the name of the automation, the status, the purpose of it, the steps, the enrollment, the triggers, and then anything that's got an email or an action, we go in basically every month to make sure it's up to date and is working as it should be. But it's so easy to forget, and I think especially stuff like the triggers, it's so easy for us to go in and we'll just add retainer on as a new job type onto Bullhorn. Yeah, of course we can do that for you. And actually, you don't necessarily realize that it's going to have a knock-on effect to all of these automations. So mapping out everything and those triggers and everything, I know it's not particularly exciting because we're so excited about getting the automations on. But yeah, you really do need to cover that. And yeah, I think a lot of the work that I end up coming to with our clients is from there's a lot of it is legacy automations from people many years ago that we're now having to pick up that necessarily weren't sort of configured. So I suppose if you're moving on from a job, do a good thing and do really good process notes and a handover. And if you're new to a job, then make sure you go through all of your automations to start with as well to make sure that you can optimize anything, because I'm sure there'll be some quick wins in there for you.
I think that's an important point to make as well, that, the automation product has come a long way in recent years as well. There are now entities that you can run automations through that you couldn't do previously. So it might be that whoever created that first automation 2 years ago was doing the best they could with the tools they had access to. But now 2 years down the line, we can make it a bit more sophisticated. We might be able to rebuild the automation, notifying a distribution list rather than an individual person. It might be that you can say, for this criteria, look to see if the field is null as opposed to being specific values that you then need to keep updated. So I'd say with every automation you have, exactly as you said there, Holly, like you want to know what it's impacting, which entities is it interacting with, are there any third-party systems? But I think also you need, in very plain English, what do you want the automation to do? There's nowhere to write that on Bullhorn automation, unfortunately, but give it a name, give it a really clear explanation. What is the outcome you're expecting? What are the other dependencies of it? And also in really plain English, is there anything that if you change this, it's going to knock your automation out of whack?
Yeah, I love that. So if we kind of move on, this is, I suppose, a similar question. How often should we be reviewing them? So if we're kind of saying that everything is kind of okay, it's just okay, like we're getting some results, but it's maybe not where it needs to be. Is there like a time period where we should be reviewing and refining every single one, do you think?
So I think for most people, they wouldn't have done this at all, or it might be that they've been an ad hoc. We need to take a look at the interview-related automations, or we need to jump in and change everything that impacts internal recruitment, for example. So I'd say step one is list out all of the automations. Go through them one by one, everything that's active, take down that core information. But I use something called a luck status. So I give it one of four options. I either leave it because it's fine, it's doing exactly what I want it to do. Update it, there's clearly something wrong with it that I can tweak to fix it and keep it active. Create it, it's a new idea, something that doesn't exist, or maybe it's replacing something else that I'm sunsetting. And finally, kill it, which I think is an important one to have, and it can be quite a liberating feeling. So, and also saves you recording all that information you may not actually need. So yeah, I'd say go through every automation, give it a status, even if it is that you've got 100 automations that all need to be updated at some point, but that allows you to build the right foundation. And once you've done that, then you can set what other cadence you might need. If you've got 10 automations, it might be you can, update them every month. But if you're, a larger business that's been using automation for a few years and you've got 150 automations, it might be that you segment them into the different parts of the workflow it interacts with, or you might say, I'm going to review 30 of them, every 2 months to make sure I can work my way through them and not have a massive job at the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely, and that luck status thing you told me about a few months ago, and I was like, that is absolutely brilliant. That is so simple and effective. What we've been doing recently is this is a hack that I saw on LinkedIn from Barclay Jones at the weekend, actually. Not that I was on LinkedIn on the weekend, obviously. And it was talking about the map view. Like 99% of the time when I go into automation, I go on the list view, which is a nightmare because you've got 100 automations there. Or we've started using the map view, so then we create in groups, and then you can see a bit more of that, and you could use the luck status in that or something very similar, just to give you that really, really clear overview. But you doing tracking stuff, coding stuff, putting that status in somewhere, just to review it. Like from our point of view, we kind of automations that have got just like an update the status or something fairly low impact that maybe doesn't have external comms, we try and review once every quarter. However, if it's an automation that's got candidate or contact emails that we need to make sure have the highest open rates, the highest click-through rates possible, we are reviewing those monthly at the moment, especially when we're working with our new clients to make sure that we get the best ROI possible, and doing some A/B testing or some further tweaks to the subject lines really can make a difference. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye on top of those ones, which is good. So,
and I think as well, the beauty of setting something like that up in a table, whether it's an Excel document or, I've used a project management tool just because it's got some of the dashboard bits built into it, but it gives that visibility, and you can say, actually, we've got this many automations. This is the state of what they are. This is how many we need to update. You can start planning out the work it's going to take to maintain what you've already built. And I'd say my final little top tip for that is take a record of the ID number, because if someone goes in there and really cleverly renames the automation, you've lost it. Whereas if you go to the URL of the automation, as long as you're in app.herefish.com, not on actual Bullhorn itself, the last kind of digits in that URL is the ID number of the automation.
There we go. That's a great hack. I hadn't thought of doing that one. So there you go. Thank you for teaching me something new. I love that. So we're going to move away from automation slightly and onto the world of AI, which I know we're talking a lot about. So there's millions of AI products coming onto the market, probably every week. At the moment, Bullhorn obviously doing a lot of things like Bullhorn AI Assistant and the Bullhorn various other AI elements that I know they're bringing out. Like, how can these tools really help enhance automation and I suppose maybe like the candidate or contact experience beyond just the traditional workflows that we can normally do?
Yeah, so I think a good thing to kind of highlight here as well is, data and data literacy got a lot of attention kind of in previous years. And now AI is such a buzz. It's important to remember the foundation of good AI is going to be the context that you give it, which is going to be making sure that the data within your system is as complete and accurate and up to date as possible. So I think this is really highlighting some of those like foundational elements. As I think that by utilizing Bullhorn's AI Assistant in combination with Bullhorn Automation is going to present a lot of opportunities to tidy up, data, have things happening behind the scenes, take workload away from either where it doesn't happen or isn't enjoyable. So one that I've been playing around with to begin with is things like where there's a CV, but the job title field might have been missed, getting the AI assistant to read the CV and then populate that in the field. And I think to begin with, it's, you can really kind of help build that trust by doing it slowly, doing it to the records where the information doesn't exist, not changing something that somebody might have populated, but just doing it behind the scenes where the activity isn't happening at the moment.
Yeah, and it's going to be the way forward, and I like that. I like that thought of just extracting stuff from the CV, using automation, using the AI to just repopulate it. I mean, like it's not changing the world, but one improvement, one field update at a time is going to dramatically improve the quality of it. I was speaking to Kylo the week before last. I'm sure they won't mind giving them a little shout out, and they were talking about using AI to. If you're on the call with a candidate and the candidate says, I want £500 a day, that is then going to automatically repopulate into the CRM, that basically using that data from the call. And I was like, that is a game changer, because recruiters will put that content in the body of the note, rightly so. That's what we would tell them to do. But then after the call, it's then a lot harder for them to go back in and update everything. And it just doesn't happen. So things like that, I think can really improve the data quality, which will then enhance the automations that we can do and will hopefully enhance the searchability and overall the candidate experience. It's exciting. What's your opinion on things like the screening agents and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think my view from what I've seen so far is we need to play a very kind of like delicate game of balance. I think there's a kind of I think that there might be an overall consensus where a decision is kind of seemingly made for us, but I think I like to think back to when I was growing up and used to go into the supermarket down the road, you'd see the same people every day before they kind of brought in
Yeah.
self-checkouts. And I think you'd find that people were a bit more helpful. People seem to enjoy the experience a little bit more. Whereas
Mm,
now you're kind of herded around to the nearest self checkout and kind of pointed at it. And, I think
yeah.
it's taken away from that experience somewhat, which I think if you then look at recruitment, that first conversation you have with a recruiter, if that's your first touch point, I think it allows for it to be a lot more positive if you've got a person on the end who can adapt their
Mhm.
tone to how you respond. Figure out actually it might be better to give you a call back tomorrow. So I think there might be that overall we move towards that direction and it opens it up as an option
Mm,
for people who like to be self-service and use the automated assistants. I think we're at risk of dropping our
mm.
standards if we're not hyper aware of the impact it might then have.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So I brought a coffee about half an hour ago from the really small coffee shop just over the road there, and I walked in and the lady was like, "Cappuccino with chocolate sprinkles," and I was like, "Yes, yeah, that's me." And I then came back into the office. I was like, "Oh my god, the lady remembered me," and it's just such that human touch, and I love that, and I think that's why we're all in the industry to have that. And I also remember the name of the first ever recruitment consultant who placed me in a job. Before I was in recruitment, I was a nanny, and the only way to get a job was through a recruitment agency. And I'll never forget the lady's name. I met her; she got me a great job, and it changed my life. And it was that human to human element. And I think the screening and the AI bots on that note will be great for certain types of job, but there'll be some things it's just not right for. And I'll be really, really interested to see how it goes. And what I often find quite interesting is we're in our little bubble. We love the recruitment industry. We love the tech behind it. However, if all of a sudden someone in my family outside of that applied for a job and they knew there was an AI agent behind it, I don't know how they'd respond. I think they'd still want that human touch, and it's going to be interesting to see if this does get implemented more over the next sort of few years, how the candidates respond to it as well.
Yeah, I think it really creates that opportunity for a better kind of asynchronous experience where
Yeah,
you can have two people in different time zones, different
yeah.
locations, different access to whether we can jump on a video call. Actually, it might be good just to smash out the
Mhm.
first little bits over that generic chat. But I think, yeah, that's what needs to, the person who's on the receiving end of AI needs to
Yeah,
benefit from it.
yeah.
And so I think if we're not going to make sure that, that's heightening a candidate experience or giving us, uh, a better response time for our
Mhm.
clients, we need to really, really carefully ask, how it's going to impact that experience.
Yeah, which weirdly enough brings me on to my next question.
Mm.
How do you, in all the work that you do, strike the right balance between real AI-driven automation stuff and AI processes and automations, and then maintaining the really important human touch?
Yeah, so I think this has come up quite a bit for us recently, actually, and my focus for this quarter is really kind of digging in on the tech that we've rolled out so far, communicating with everyone in the business, and making sure that all of our teams, managers, L&D team are all up to speed with everything that is available to us.
Nice.
Now, I don't think we're quite where we want to be in terms of that journey, but we're definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think one thing to talk about is kind of the rhythm of change, and it's something that I'm kind of reading into a little bit more, kind of sort of separately from work, but making sure that we're not overwhelming people with too many changes at one time, making sure that the change is clearly communicated and intentional. We're doing this so that it impacts that, and that someone's not just seeing it as we're just changing it for the sake of changing it, but we're changing it for that individual's benefit, their team's benefit, or the business's benefit. Um, I think that is really important as well to make sure that that is highlighted within the communication. So it's not just you know, I'm doing it because I like things being in certain boxes or I like having a shorter list than we did last week. But what is going to be the transferable impact?
Mm,
Um, I think as well, it's also been a very exciting time, the last sort of year, 18 months,
mm,
to change the narrative about systems. And I think often it's come from a perspective of it needs to follow this process, everyone needs to do the
mm,
same thing, and it can come quite a almost sort of like yeah, you're dictating how something should work. I
mm.
think it's become a lot more flexible. We've been able to say yes to more requests. We've
Yeah.
got access to rec tech that we can change the way that it works. We can make edits to the process. It's flexible enough that if a certain team works in some way, we can make the process adapt to that. So I think it's been really good to sort of have those conversations and say, yeah, give us your wish list. Tell us
Mm.
what you want the system to do, and then being able to go away, make things work behind the scenes, fuse bits of tech together to make it a much more positive conversation about change.
What I think is quite interesting on that is one of the activities that we do normally with our clients. And if you haven't done this in your business, go and give this a go next week. Is we do a really simple survey, and we just ask the recruitment teams, what do you wish X product, e.g., Bullhorn, would do that it currently doesn't do? And you come back with a whole load of answers. And 9 times out of 10, it's stuff that is doable already, which makes the change so much easier if it's actually something people actually want. So then you can kind of go in and buy this actually already here. Like, I'll just sit down with you for 5 minutes. Here it is. And then when you come back to them in 2 weeks' time with another change or an enhancement, they're kind of really pleased about it because they've got the buy-in and you've already supported them. So they're more up for listening to your ideas. And often it's the really simple stuff. Um, I think for me, the most important thing is communication and the tracking of it all. I often speak to clients who go, "Oh yeah, we did do this. We did have job priority turned on, and we did have definitions for it 3.5 years ago." And I'm like, "Well, where are those definitions? I don't know." So actually, again, for the longevity of the business, having that change, tracking it, detailing it, so that in 6 months, 6 days, or 6 years' time, you've still got that entire process flowing and what should be happening, which is so much easier for you to roll out and implement time and time again.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's that as well, like making sure that there's kind of no unnecessary rush. I mean, I think, we'll agree that in the recruitment industry, a lot of the time it can feel like there are, very short deadlines. You need to move quickly. We kind of joke that the deadline's yesterday a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But with a lot of this kind of new tech, especially when it comes to these AI
Mm.
products, they're ever evolving. So if you wait
Yeah.
another month until you take action on that tool, actually it might have improved in that time. And I think, don't be afraid to almost create that demand internally. Some of the most successful rollouts that I've been a part of have been where you start off with a small group, you tell other
Mhm.
people they aren't getting access in that first phase, depending
Mhm.
on the success of that first group. And then all of a sudden it's, people tapping on the
Mm.
shoulder, asking for access, managers saying, why have only half of my team got access to
Yeah.
it? And, actually, it's far better to have that demand than it is to kind of be forcing a
Mhm.
change that people don't fully understand or still have loads of questions about that they're just not asking.
And it's so much easier for you to spend time and get valuable quantitative feedback from 10 people than it is 120 people. So yeah, I love that idea. Like small groups, if I kind of call them like tech champions who are going to be supported, but also honest. Because what I always worry about whenever I'm doing training, if you get a team of recruiters who just sit there nodding and have no questions, I think, oh my gosh, they've not got it. And I always kind of say, I can normally tell who like the top billers are because they normally come in and they ask me 25 questions because they're worried their processes are going to change. So actually getting a variety of people on board who get the systems and are honest will definitely help. We're going to go through one more question with James, but if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If we don't get time to go through them all today, we will drop back in later and drop a comment as well. Or you can obviously, of course, connect with James or I on LinkedIn if we're not already. So final question, James. What's one automation or AI trend that you're most excited about? And then how should we start preparing our businesses for it?
So I think I'll kind of piggyback off of what you were saying there about being able to have those conversations, have AI listening in, and being able to update things kind of within the system. Now, I think a kind of next stage of that, and something that we're starting to see, is around directive AI. Being able to use the fact that you've had certain touch points with a person, or they've re-engaged with an email that you sent them 20 days ago, to then start prompting what that next step looks like.
Mhm.
And I think the real exciting piece there, I think, is seeing it rather than a individual what's the next action, in terms of how should that then shape the workflow. And I think kind of with the better access to, be tracking each of these touch points, being able to track, when somebody clicked, how quickly was it between action one and action two,
Mhm.
being able to have AI say, actually, we should remove this step of the workflow, or we're going to, add in these two touch points to make sure we can build up trust, take them out for a coffee. Um, you know, Adding in those other touch points that aren't just a automated email or a connection request, but feeding back into, actually, based on what we've analyzed, go and get a human touch in. Go and make sure that you've taken them for coffee,
Mhm.
had an in-person meeting, jumped on a video call, but sort of promoting when you need to have that human connection.
I love that, and I think it's definitely something that's is going to be on the horizon sooner rather than later. And always the AI that's not seeming like AI to really add that connection between the recruiters and the candidates, I think is going to be key. I think for me, the trend that I'm excited about is what I'm going to call a search and match,
Mm.
or however you want to describe it. So many times I see just recruiters aimlessly searching stuff that isn't right. They're kind of half doing Boolean, half doing like skill searching. And if there's a way in which AI can really start to produce high quality candidates that are based on the job description, the client's needs, or whatever, then that's the dream, right? Because that's going to make us all so much more efficient. I'm sure I read a comment the other day saying like the standard recruiter spends 80% of their time searching. And I was like, oh my God, like no wonder the fill rates in the industry are like 25, 30%. If we can streamline that, get the candidates delivered to them, we can then go in with that human touch, or the AI to really engage with those people further. So that meaningless searching just doesn't need to be done. But that's obviously, as we've just said, only be as good as the data that comes into it.
Yeah, and I think that might start to open the door to say, do we need different data? As opposed to,
Mm.
at the moment, things that fit nicely into a box so that we can filter it in a list. Do we actually need a, full description of the person? Do we need a more in-depth, character profile of someone, so that they can better match that person to the, you know, uh, individual skills, tasks, and stuff that fall into the job?
And if
So I
it's
think it's interesting to see how it's going to change. Yeah.
And if you look at something like Amazon here, like they know what we're buying. They know that they know what we're watching on Amazon Prime. They know probably like what groceries we're ordering if we do groceries. And they know all of this stuff about us. And we don't have a problem with giving that to them. And we're giving all of our personal insights over to a multi-billion, zillion pound company. Who knows what they're going to do with all of that? And yet, actually, as recruiters, should we be asking and trying to get more information from our candidates that really will add valuable insights on their job searching? And I think most candidates will probably be quite open to giving us more insights. Like, how often do you want us to be communicated with? And that's stuff that we can do now. Is then just taking it to the next level and actually implementing it and using that data and getting enough of it to actually be a valuable insight.
Well, and that might be where the self checkouts come in to
Yeah.
play, to say, actually, if you want to go out of your way to give us more information that will benefit you in the way that we communicate with you, the jobs we match you
Mm.
to, stuff like that, you can choose to engage with it. And I think that's where we've seen other implementations of AI being successful, where it's done on a voluntary basis. If you want to step forward and use it, go ahead. But we're not going to change everything to just
Yeah.
now having this as the only way to engage with us.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm gonna go in for one final question. I've gone off piste again now, sorry. Um if what one piece of advice would you give to a recruitment agency who is kind of just very new on their AI and automation journey? Like what would you tell them to really set them up for success?
So I'll go in for sort of two little bits, and I'd say, firstly, kind of lean into the tools you're already familiar with. You know, don't try and reinvent the wheel, reinvent your process. You know, every process that we have, you know, is probably a few other things you could improve along the way, but don't get distracted. Stay, you know, this is the thing that we're, you know, looking to automate. This is the piece of AI that we're looking to engage with. Do it well, do it in a focused way. Then add the other tasks to the bottom of your list at the end of it. But you know, if you're already using Bullhorn or LinkedIn Recruiter, you know, lean into what they've currently got access to, save you the cost of building it somewhere else, save you the worry that it's not going to be compliant. You know, do it
Yeah.
within something that you're already familiar with. And the second piece is be interested in it. You know, you don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have loads of knowledge. It's always changing. You know, you're always going to feel like you're catching up. But, you know, one thing I've done is I've started reading a few books on it. You know, some of
Love it.
them AI 2041, really, really interesting read. And it's not a boring AI book. You know, it's written like a collection of 10 stories. So
Nice.
find ways to engage with it that don't feel like hard work.
Yeah, you've got to really, really enjoy it. Like we both love what we do, and we both are very passionate about it. And I think it really helps with the work because we want to find solutions, we want to make improvements. So if there's somebody, if you're watching this and that doesn't align with you, see if there's someone else who can support you, or try and learn to love it and learn the nuance of it. Because if you're passionate about it, it makes life so much easier, doesn't it? And you'll do a better job as well. And there's lots of books out there. I feel like you need to do a LinkedIn post soon, James, about all those lovely books that you read.
Yeah, you might get one sooner than you think, eh?
I look forward to it. Anyway, thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions, do put them in the comments, and we'll jump back in tomorrow to follow them up. This is our last in the series. At the moment, we've done 3 now with Jade, Tracy, and James. We will probably be doing some more after I've been over to Boston in a few weeks for Bullhorn Engage. I'm going to do a special edition covering off everything, all of the insights that we've had from Bullhorn Engage as well. So thank you very much for joining. James, thank you very much for adding your insights, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Here we